Hi everyone, I'm Shuzhen Chen, an assistant professor of business school at Central South University and a postdoc of Rotman School of Management, University of Toronto. The topic of my presentation is optimal dynamic clearing for interbank payments. It's a joint work with Opher and Ningyuan Chen from Rotman School of Management. I will first introduce the background of the clearing problem and give an overview of how our work is related with existing literature. Then I will demonstrate the clearing problems through a simple example and show some structural properties of the optimal clearing policy, or wrap up the talk with conclusions and future directions. Our work is based on some observations of interbank payment systems. The first observation is the trend of real-time payment systems. With new technology and digital commerce driving the lead for safer and faster payments, payments companies have been developing real-time payment systems. For example, the Clearinghouse Payments Company launched the real-time payments in November 2017. By the end of the second quarter this year, the deposit share coverage of the real-time payments network has been about 40% in half of the states. The second observation is the daily patterns of interbank payments. The payment obligations are created constantly over time between banks and in both directions. The banks are recycling the payments received from other banks to make their own banks. The external funds are used are relatively small. And to reduce the use of external funds, the banks tend to delay the settlement of large value payments. As shown in this figure, the average volume of the payments is decreasing through the course of a day, but the average value of the payments fluctuates with some peaks around key time points. For example, 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock in the morning, and 4 o'clock and 6 o'clock in the afternoon. These settlement delays will cause liquidity loss in the system and may also cause payment congestion and increase operational risk. Liquidity saving mechanisms have been proposed and widely adopted to motivate early settlement. It is a centralized mechanism that matches all possible offsetting debts to minimize the liquidity requirements for clearing a payment network at a time point. Given the intraday liquidity, the settlement delay can be reduced by introducing the liquidity saving mechanisms. By implementing a whole package of the liquidity saving mechanism, the reduction can be more significant. But the current liquidity saving mechanisms do not incorporate the daily patterns of interbank payments and might optically clear all debts at every payment. This may not be optimal from a dynamic clear perspective, because some debts can be left in the system to buffer future payment obligations to in opposite directions to reduce the liquidity usage. We analyze the liquidity saving mechanism type central design that matches payment obligations between banks while balancing the payment flows intertemporally. To the best of my knowledge, those studies have focused on the questions of how much and when to clear to minimize the total costs throughout the whole day. But there are some literature on settlement mechanism and the intraday credit policy that reveals the possible clearing policies in practice. The first stream ability to compare the late settlement mechanism with the real-time gross settlement mechanism. The second stream focuses on the hybrid mechanism and tries to incorporate the liquidity saving advantage on the late settlement mechanism into real-time gross settlement system. So this mechanism is also called the liquid saving mechanism. Some literature further investigates the role of intraday credit policy in motivating early settlement. Based on the literature, there are 4 possible clearing policies. First is to clear all debts in every period, which corresponds to the real-time gross settlement mechanism. The second is to clear all offsetting debts in every period, which corresponds to the liquid saving mechanism without intraday credit. The third is to clear all offsetting debts and some net debts in every period, which corresponds to the liquid saving mechanism with intraday credit. Thus, is to clear only at the end of the day, which corresponds to the late settlement mechanism. We analyze the optimal policy that minimizes the total cost under the liquid saving mechanism with intraday credit. Our work falls into the interface of finance and operations on 2 aspects. First, we keep track of the financial debts in a financial system. This network approach has been commonly adopted in literature to analyze the debt structure. Second, we adopt dynamic programming and the idea of inventory management, the 2 core topics in operations research, and apply them to the debt clearing in a financial system. The cost structure is derived from the literature of payment economics. Based on the framework of Berger et al. 1996, the cost of operating a payment system includes the direct settlement cost, which constitutes the setup cost of each clearing, and the cost of addressing risks and the externalities associated with the settlement of payments. Based on the thorough analysis of Constraint et al. 2003, the settlement risk can arise from liquidity risk and credit risk. To control the liquidity risk, a coordination is required for late clearing and will incur a variable clearing cost. To control the credit risk, collateral proportional to the total debt level is required and will incur a liquidity cost. We consider a discrete time model and divide each day into T periods, for example, at intervals of 5 minutes. We consider 2 types of costs, the clearing cost and the liquidity cost, and the objective is to minimize the total costs. We assume that the system operator has full information of the debts between banks. And the system operator needs to decide when and how much to clear throughout the whole day. To give you a clear picture of the clearing problem, I'll introduce 3 banks example to show the debt relations in a payment system, possible clearing policies, and the dynamics in a debt process. At each period, the system operator has full information of the financial debts as shown in this figure. Denoted by BIJ, the financial debts bank I owes to bank J, we can summarize the financial debts into in a table and calculate the total debt in the system denoted by capital D. We can also calculate the total debt each bank owes to other banks as shown in the last column, and the total debt owed by other banks as shown in the 5th row. Offsetting of debt is allowed in each clearing. On a financial basis, the offsetting debt between Bank 1 and Bank 2 is the minimum of the 2 financial debts, that is 150. On a multilateral basis, the offsetting debt is the minimum of the total debt each bank owes to other banks, and the total debt owed by other banks. After subtracting the offsetting debts from the total debt each bank owes, we can get the net debt of each bank. For Bank 1, it is 50. Note that the individual net debts can be either positive or negative, and the summation of the individual net debts is 0. the summation of the positive individual net debt is the net debt of the system, denoted by small d. We can prove that to make the optimal clearing policy, the system operator only needs to focus on the individual net debt and the total debt instead of the pair-wide debt. We show the second and the third clearing policies. The second policy is to clear or offsetting debts. The red line denotes the original debt. The black line denotes the debt after clearing. Because all offsetting debts are cleared, the total debt and the net debt after clearing are equal to the original net debt in the system, 150. The third policy is to clear all offsetting debts and some net debts. So the total debt and the net debt after clearing are 100 less than the original net debt in the system. It is worth noting that while the second policy is unique, there exists infinite number of possible end states in the third policy. For example, we can clear 20 net debts of Bank 2 and 30 net debts of Bank 1 instead of 50 net debt of Bank 1. The total debt and the net debt after clearing are still 100. So if there is net clearing, we need to consider a priority problem. After each clearing policy, new debts are created in next period and the process repeats. For example, if the second policy is adopted, all offsetting debts are cleared. The remaining debts include 100 debts Bank 2 owes to Bank 3 and 50 debts Bank 1 owes to Bank 3. Adding next period debts, we can get a new debt network and calculate the individual net debt, the total debt and net debt in the system. With all the information, the system operator needs to again decide whether and how much to clear. Now I have shown through the example some basics of the clearing problem, including the information structure, the possible clearing policies, and the dynamics of the payment process. We can get this clearing model. Denoted by pi t, the minimal expected cost includes the remaining t periods. If the system operator acts optimally in all periods, it can be written as the summation of the period cost and the future cost pi t minus 1. K is the setup cost, beta c is the unit coordinate cost, beta L is the unit liquid cost. So the period cost is the setup cost plus the coordinate cost if there is a clearing, and the liquid cost of uncleared debts. By induction, we can prove that the optimal clearing policy has some structure. First, the matrix-based problem can be reduced into a vector-based problem. Second, it is optimal to clear at some periods and not clear at other periods. Third, if clear, it is always optimal to clear all the offsetting debts. Last, when beta c is larger than or equal to 2 beta L, the optimal policy is to clear all along. As I mentioned before, to make the optimal clearing policy, the system operator only needs to focus on the total debt and the individual net debts. But this information structure requires additional constraints. First, the individual net debts are balanced. That is, the summation should be equal to 0. The second is about the accounting of the net debt in the system. And as to the clearing policy, they should not increase or invert debts. So the individual net debt, the absolute value of the individual net debt after clearing should not be greater than that before clearing, and they should have the same sign. Moreover, the net debt after clearing in the system should not be greater than the total debt after clearing. Last, we have a period-to-period debt flow constraint based on the dynamics of the payment process. Based on the two lemmas, we can prove the proposition of clearing or offsetting debt first. When beta L is larger than or equal to 2 times beta C, the optimal policy is to clear all along, and we have the following clearing regions determined by net debt and total debt. I'm gonna use an example to show the clear all along policy compared with the two other policies. Policy 1 is to clear all debts in every period. Policy 2 is to clear all offsetting debts in every period. The initial individual net debts are respectively 50, 100, and minus 150. The total debt and the net debt in the system is 150. The new individual net debts are respectively minus 20, minus 40, and 60. The total debt is 100. The setup cost is 100. The unit coordination cost is 0.5. The unit liquidity cost is 1. The total cost on the policy 1 and the policy 2 are respectively 500, 65, and 600. The optimal policy is to clear all debts in periods 2 and 3 and not clear in other periods. The total cost is 525. The differences of the three policies can be seen more clearly by comparing the corresponding states at each period. The liquidity cost is higher under the optimal policy than under the policy 1, because 150 debts are reserved from debt 4 to debt 3, and the coordination cost is also higher at period 3. But the optimal policy saves a setup cost of 100 and a coordination cost of 75 at period 4, and a coordination cost of 30 at period 1. So the optimal policy saves a total cost of 40. Compared with the other two policies, policy 2 incurs a same or higher liquidity cost at each period. The coordination cost saving is 75 compared with the optimal policy. So the total cost on the policy 2 is the highest. Here are the main takeaways. First, the system operator only needs to keep track of the net debt of individual banks and the total debt in the system. Second, if it is optimal to clear, all offsetting debt should be cleared first. Third, when the liquidity cost outweighs the coordination cost, the optimal policy is to clear all along. And when the total debt is about the fixed point of some functions, or the net debt is about the largest fixed point, it is optimal to clear. For future work, we will run additional numerical experiments to derive more insights of the optimal clearing policy. We will also work on the fluid model to analyze the clearing frequency. That's all my talk. Thanks for your attention.